Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Kyle. Greg's back there somewhere. And we are starting a new job site. And instead of just doing a straight up build series, I thought we're going to utilize this job site to show you guys some maybe more specialized videos. And this video in particular is going to be about layout and how we get a perfectly square building from the start, because we didn't do this foundation work, but we want to make sure that when we build our structure that it is square and the appropriate dimensions. And even though this is super basic, super easy, it's just one single square that we've got to square up and get dimensionally accurate, you can apply these same tips and tricks that we're going to share with you for just about any home or structure that you're going to build. Obviously, if it doesn't have curves and stuff, because then it gets even more tricky, and I'm probably not even the guy to explain that to you. So I'll show you guys some of the how-to on squaring up your building from the start so you can start square, because you can never end square without starting square, and it is the most important to start correctly at the beginning. So I'm going to show you guys with the tried and true tape measure method, which anybody can go out and get a tape measure. Doesn't cost a whole lot of money, and if you know how to read one, they can be used obviously to your advantage. However, I will also show you the Stabila 180 we like to use because it's easy, it's accurate, it's very fast. One guy can basically do all the layout, but it takes a little bit of upfront cost. Obviously, it's not for everybody. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. All right, now first thing, I get this question a lot, is when we build a building, this is a 72 by 96 building. We're gonna make sure that the foundation, the goal is that the foundation is 72 by 96, but we're actually gonna frame in our columns 1.5 inches so that when we put our 2x around the perimeter, the finished frame is 72 by 96. So that will come into play later. But what I like to do first is we want to run the tape measure around all 4 walls and confirm dimensions. So what we're going to do then, since this is the front of the building, this is the one that everybody's going to come up to, we try to start there's my tape measure. We try to start on the front of the building, and we're going to go ahead and hit 1.5 inch mark and 1.5 inch mark. Now what that is going to do is that is the starting point. In the perfect world, this building is already perfectly square. This concrete is perfect, and it might be good, but we're going to find out, and we're going to use this as our starting point. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this tape measure down, and we're going to mark out 71.9 because we want 1.5 inches there, and we want 1.5 inches all the way down here. So if I take this tape measure and we give it a little bit of a snug pull, you'll see that we're about 1/8 inch shy of 72. Now, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't change the concrete, but we do need to make sure that our building is accurate. So what I'm going to do is pull this, get it right where I want it, about 1.5 inches off, and I'm going to mark 10.5. That is because when I add a 2x4 around this, it's going to be at 72, but this is the line that we're defining for our columns. So we're going to do that on all 4 walls, and we'll get back to you with the next step where we actually use those corner dimensions that I'm marking out and check them for square. This is a new tape measure from Stabila, actually. What's cool about it is if you're a right-handed person, right-handed, it just as easily will switch over to this side if you're a left-handed person. It's the LBM 1000 steel. That is very important. That's something to remember when doing long distance measuring. You do not want to use a fiberglass or plastic tape measure because they stretch, and when a tape measure stretches, as we can imagine, you do not get accurate readings. So this is a 330-foot steel tape. It still will have some stretch, but very minimal at the distances that we're working. So once we have the correct dimensions, that doesn't mean you actually have a square layout, because if you've ever heard of a parallelogram can have 4 equal sides, or 2 sets of equal sides in this instance, where we have a I guess actually a diamond would be another sort of building shape that we would not want, because the angles aren't 90 degrees. You want either a rectangle or a square. So now that we have accurate dimensions, what I'm looking for is the diagonal dimension that is going to tell me that these 2 walls that we're squaring off are actually square to each other. So what I'm looking for is 119.7 and 13/16. So if I hold this right here, I'm 119.7 and 7/8, which is actually a 1/16 big. I'm gonna say that this is probably good enough with a tape measure, because when you pull a tape, there's always gonna be a little bit of push and pull, and a 1/16 of an inch, guys, on a 72 by 96, is probably plenty good. We like to see the exact number we're going for. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move over and we're gonna check the other diagonal. When you have 2 equal diagonals that are both the correct diagonal and 4 equal sides that are the right dimension, then you know you're good. And what I like to do, I don't know if you're gonna be able to see this or not, my 2 dimensions, which is 71 foot 9 inch, that's my run, okay? Now I've got 95 foot 9 inch rise, okay? What that is gonna give me is a diagonal dimension of 119 and 7/13. So when you have these 3 dimensions, you're guaranteed to have a square building. But we've got 2 triangles in every square, so we gotta make sure that both triangles are square. So we're gonna check the other side now. So you can see now that pile of material that I'm going over top of, it means that my dimension is that I'm pulling is actually gonna be a little bit shorter. So if that pile wasn't there, my tape would be a little bit longer. Now, not a ton, but a little bit. So I'm looking for now Greg is holding it at 1 foot. That's another thing for accuracy purposes. Anytime we pull a tape measure, instead of holding it at the end, we like to hold it at 1 foot, and then we adjust our measurement by a foot because it's easier to hold to a 1 foot mark than to hold the edge of the tape measure right where you think you want it. So now what I'm doing is I'm making sure that I'm nice and straight. The long dimensions are obviously the hardest to do this on. And then I'm looking for 127 and 13/16. Now this is exactly like over there where I'm actually 7/8. But I'm on top of my material, so I'm actually going to stick with, 1 second, Greg, one more time. I'm actually going to stick with the dimension that I've got here because that 1/16 of an inch is gonna come out on that pile. And once again, 1/16 of an inch is plenty good enough. Greg, that's the best wall we've ever done for squareness. Both diagonals were the same, 7/8, and all dimensions were the same.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Yeah. So that to me means we're square. The pile was just doing a little bit something. So now what we're gonna do is, I showed you guys with the tape measure, you get 4 sides, and this was an easy one. You get 4 sides, all your dimensions, and then you pull diagonals. That's really all you gotta do. That gives you your 4 corners. Now, we would normally snap a line, start laying out our brackets, but I'll show you how you can do it real easily, if it's not so easy, with a LA180. All right, guys, now like as promised, we've got our corner marked. We marked all corners, and in order to confirm square, instead of pulling a tape measure, now this really works well on sites that are not level, on sites that are confusing, they're not perfect squares like this. That's where Stabila, or yes, and that's what I'm saying, like when you've got super unlevel sites and you can't pull a diagonal accurately, the laser is always going to be accurate. So this is the LA180L, and what we're going to do is we're going to turn it on and set it up on our first corner. We've got a plumb bob line laser that's shining right down exactly where the 2 lasers are coming out of this tool, and it's going to self-level, and I'm just confirming that my plumb dot is right on that mark. Now, Greg has this receiver. This receiver is really cool because it actually talks with this laser to find the laser. It will move the laser till it hits the receiver and lock on place. Now, the reason that's important is because when we can lock on to one line, this is a 90-degree laser line that's going to give us the perfect point down there that we can use the receiver for. So you'll see how this works. Greg, you're the best at this. I'll let you do your thing. So Greg is going to turn that laser on. He's going to tell it to start searching for it. Hear that? This thing just took off, and it's actually already pretty close. It's already got a green light. I don't know if you can see it down there, but it's already locked on. Okay, so this job is already going too good, guys, because I set the thing up and it already was locked on exactly. Are you serious?
Yeah, we're right on a mark. I don't know.
Okay, so normally that doesn't happen, and you'll see it because we'll do another one. But now that we have this line locked on and Greg has this receiver in lock mode, what it's going to do is it can see this laser a lot better than our eyes. Let me see this, Greg. So you see how it's giving me a red light? It's saying, hey, go this way. And as I move closer that way, boom, green light. What that means is this, at this point, if I were to set this right here, yeah, it's a good point because that's what we like to do. We like to mark our doors. I can take this receiver and mark right by this doorway. What that means is that is exactly where my straight line is. And I can come out here, which we're normally gonna do, if this is accurate. We don't even know this to be accurate exactly where we want it yet, but I bet you it's gonna be dang close. I can hit another mark here. That way when we snap our line, we're not snapping a 72-foot line, we can just snap a 36-foot line. So now we're gonna take this, we're gonna leave the LA180, and we're gonna go to the other end. Now the really nice thing would be is if when Greg gets to this end, that receiver is marked and locked right on the mark that we already put on the wall. Okay guys, so real quick, we've got this LA180 sitting here. We locked onto the front wall. Greg took that receiver to the other corner, confirmed that our pencil mark that we had made on this wall was within like a 32nd. I mean, we're talking really freaking close. That tells me that I'm probably pretty dang comfortable with the marks from the tape measure. But I'm also gonna say that I didn't need the tape measure marks. I could have came out here, set the LA180 on this corner, went over there, measured 1.5 inches off my concrete, and it would have given me the mark way down there that we needed. And now you're probably saying, well, that's only 2 walls, Kyle. How do you make sure your other wall is square? Well, that's what I'll show you next. All right, so now we take the 180 and we come down to the long wall that we just marked off of the receiver with the laser receiver. And I'm gonna set up the LA180 here. And I'm gonna purposely try to set it off a little so you guys get to see the effect. We're gonna start it up. It's gonna give me a plumb dot. And now what I can do is I'm gonna take the receiver and I'm gonna go down here and I'm gonna get it set up. And we're just gonna wait for that laser to come back to me. Because when you don't start close, it goes one way every time. And I don't know which way it's going, probably away from me. Actually, it's coming back. There it is. Yep. So it just hit my receiver. It told the laser to slow down. And now it's gonna very incrementally and very slowly, precisely work its way back. Okay, so now we lock on. And really, why did we do this?
I think you're just showing like.
No, dude, I need to lock onto that one and then confirm this. Same concept, but yes, what we should have done was locked onto the long run, then came over and confirmed this corner. But since I got it locked onto this corner, we'll go down and we'll see how close we are way back down over here. It's like on the edge of your marker. Like the marker line, it's not in the center of your marker line, it's on the edge of your marker line. I mean, to me, we're talking about hairs here. We've confirmed this square and the square down there. And we've got one more wall to concern ourselves with, but really all we really care is that if this dimension is 95.9, this dimension is 71.9, and that dimension down there is 71.9, and these two corners are square, all we need to make sure is that those marks are 95.9. And then we've got 2 sets of equal measurements and two right angles. We're gonna have 2 more right angles. That's just the way it is. And we've already confirmed that with the tape measure because it hit all of our marks that we set with the tape measure. So the LA180 is an expensive tool, but I could have done all this layout myself. You can't lay out with tape measures with one person, and you're never gonna be efficient, you're never gonna be accurate. But with this, you can be accurate every time. And it's one of those tools that you buy once, cry once. So now that we've got the layout done, we're gonna get everything marked. And the next thing that we'll talk about, because you guys don't care about laying out probably the posts, you've seen us do it a million times, it will be elevation. Because once you build on top of concrete, concrete's never perfect. And we'll show you how we kind of zero out the top of the concrete to make sure that everything is level on the inside. Windows, doors, trusses, fascia, stuff like that. So now that we have our marks, we're gonna go ahead and drop down some chalk line. And this is just so we can see exactly where we're gonna lay out and mark all of our brackets. You go ahead and put yours down, Greg. Greg is gonna burn me a foot, and we keep saying that is he's actually gonna hold 1 foot at the mark instead of the end. And then I'm going to change my dimensions. All of our posts are 8 foot on center, so I'm going to go, instead of 8 foot on center from outside edge, which means we're actually 7 foot 10.5, okay? So when you hear us say 10.5 and 9, 10.5 is a pull from an end. 9 is when you're checking the very end off of one end. So you're losing 1.5 inches around the perimeter. So what I like to do is I'm gonna go ahead and run this tape all the way out. Exactly 72.9, which you're burning a foot, so that's perfect. So that's what we wanna see. You know, we're always checking our dimensions and double checking, because sometimes you think you see the right dimension and then you get to the point of framing and you're like, oh, I had footitis. So I like to call them out so Greg can hear me, and he can also say, Kyle, that's wrong. So I want to be 8 foot. So I'm actually going to go 8 foot 10 and a half. What that does is it puts me, because I'm burning a foot, it'll put me 8 foot center from the edge of the wall, okay? So that's the important thing. So now I'm gonna go every 8 foot. So 8 foot 10 and a half, 16, 10 and a half, and we're just making a tick mark. 24, 10 and a half, 32, 10 and a half, 40 foot 10 and a half. So we're gonna follow this exact same process on all 4 walls. And we'll also need to lay out our doors, garage doors, but that's not too much of a concern for us. All right, so now that we have all of our line snapped, our post marked out, we're gonna come through and we're gonna set our brackets. And this is one of those things where you could go out, take your tape measure, mark the center of these 2 1/4, and then line them up perfectly. But your eye is pretty good at putting that line in the middle, at least, I mean, when you do it enough. So we don't necessarily do that. We're not going to spend that time, because it's one of those things that you don't get time back, and you don't want to waste it doing things that don't matter. So we're going to eyeball these center, and then we're going to go ahead and put some quarter by 2 3/4 Tapcons in the small holes to get the bracket locked down right where we want it. And then we'll come back through with a bigger 5/8 Titan HD anchor bolt, and that's what's going to really secure these down. Almost forgot. ISOtunes, man. You don't want to do this all day without hearing protection. One other thing I want to do is I'm going to check the depth. There's no reason to bury these for no reason. So I'm going to give myself about a 1/2 inch at the bottom of the hole, and that's as deep as I'm going to dig. Or not in this case dig, but drill. And then I like to use the Makita Soft Impact for this, because it just does a pretty good job. And that's all we're going to do right now, because we're going to come back later with a bigger SDS, and we're going to hit those big holes next. All right, so when we get to our corners, we're going to cut these brackets in half, and then I'm just setting the inside 4.5 inches off of my outside line, because my columns are 4.5 inches thick. And there won't be any bracketry on the outside, so that our 2x can go right around the outside unrestricted. Now with door jambs here, and especially on a foundation wall, instead of an exact, like this is a 10-foot door, we actually have them make these openings 10'3", so always 3 inches bigger. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a 4.5 inch wide column sit here, and then a 4th ply is gonna go right down along the edges. So that's why these are set the way they are. So these are our anchor bolts. These are Simpson Titan HD 6-inch 5/8, and these things are awesome. This is the 1/2 inch high torque. This thing's a beast too. So yesterday we got rained out at the end of the day, but we were able to secure all of our brackets to the wall. Now, the final thing for us for layout that is important is that each one of these brackets that is installed around this perimeter is not necessarily at the exact same elevation. So in a perfect world, the top of the wall is going to be perfectly, level, but that doesn't always happen, and that's fine, because we have an LAR350 rotary laser, and we've got a grade stick. This grade stick we're gonna set, and this receiver is gonna give us a number based off of where we set it on the bracket in relation to every other bracket. So I'll show you what I mean and why this is important for layout, because this is like the last stage of making sure that everything is set up as good as possible so that you can build a nice square level building that looks good and makes your client happy. All right, so now that we have the receiver set on the grade stick, what we're gonna do is just set this right in our bracket. And it's important to make sure that this is always plumb. You want this rod as plumb as possible because it's gonna be the most accurate as possible when it is plumb. If you deviate from plumb, your number is not gonna be accurate, and accuracy is what we're after. So I'm just gonna set this in the middle of my bracket, and I've got this turned off so you guys don't hear the laser, but it's basically reading 5/16 low. So if you can see the arrow is pointing up, it's saying 5/16, and if I bring the receiver up, it's gonna find 0 right there. Now, Greg, look at the bottom of my grade rod. Can you see at the bottom of my grade rod that there is space underneath my grade rod? Can you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay, what that means is that in order to find 0, I need to add material to the bottom of my post to bring it up that 5/16 of an inch. So what we do is on each one of these brackets, we're just gonna take a Sharpie, gonna write upside down so we get confused later, and we're gonna write plus 5/16. And each bracket is gonna be potentially slightly different. Now, this one, making sure I'm plumb, this one is also 5/16. What we found on this job site is these brackets are all very consistent. Now, they're not perfect. As you can see, this is 5/16, and you're saying, well, what's 0, Kyle? What does that mean? Well, we found the highest bracket and set that at 0. And that's because of some details later that I'm not really ready to talk about in this video, but it's important for us to find our highest bracket on the wall, set it at 0, and then we just go and check every bracket. It doesn't take long. And what this ensures is that we're as accurate as possible when we set our trusses later on. All right, so that is layout in a nutshell, guys. That is the most important part of any build for us, is the starting point. We need to make sure that we have an accurate perimeter, so we gotta have the right dimensions. We gotta make sure that all those corners are nice and square. You can use the tried and true tape measure method, the Pythagorean theorem. You know, when you sat in math class and you said, I don't ever need to use this in my life, we use that math all the time. I say we loosely, I use it, Greg just follows suit, but if you get the construction calculator, it's the Construction Master Pro. It'll give you all that information. You don't have to do the math, just type in your rise run. It'll give you your diagonal that you're gonna, mark. Or if you love tools as much as I do, if you do a ton of layout, if you're not always in perfect conditions, the LA180 from Stabila is the bee's knees. I don't know why I said that word, but it's just really cool. It works awesome. And for a one-man operation, you can lay out and square up a building very easily. The next important thing for us for layout is to make sure that we know the elevation on each bracket so that we can appropriately make our building level across the board. So everything is on the same plane, and that's important. So layout, layout, layout. It's the most important part. If you don't take the time up front, you're gonna be spending more time down the road to try to make things work out in your favor. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions about layout, drop them down below in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up. If you didn't, well, let me know what I could do different next time, but please hit that subscribe button. Stick around for more video content. Got a lot more always coming, and if you have ideas for future videos, drop those down below too. Until later, we'll catch you guys on the next one.